Hello everyone, welcome to another tutorial on the REST API series. My name is Jairaj and thanks for joining again. So till now we have seen many different informative videos in this series and the information that we gain is going to be really very helpful to understand REST as a whole. And now we are moving forward to design a discussion section of this series, and in this particular video we will discuss how to design URI and other words how to design identifier. But before starting this video, hit that red subscribe button to support this channel, and don't forget to like, share and subscribe so we can keep providing you good quality videos on various technologies. And also our goal here is to provide knowledge to as many people as possible. So let's start this video. So internet is huge nowadays. It is not a few devices only. If you look around you, we have not only computers, but we have so many different kind of devices that uses internet, such as mobile phones, tablets, watches, and our home and car also. And even bicycles and scooters also nowadays uses internet. So we have services like Ford and Lyft that provides bicycles and scooter which uses internet. And also we have technologies such as Internet of Things, gaming consoles and streaming services like Netflix and others. We have Ultra HD and 4K and 8K videos. So our internet is changing rapidly with a huge traffic and load on it. So in this situation, API is the method that is capable to provide a service with a desired output that can sustain this kind of huge load. So that's why API is very important, and as a developer, it is our duty that we create API in such a way that it is capable to provide service to anything, anywhere and anytime. And also API should be easy to understand and provides a desired output with authentication and authorization, because the more the internet grows, there will be more security related issues. Also, we need to have some consistency because there will be millions of APIs, and we have to make some system or some methodology that reduces our effort of making API or designing the API, because our main task is to focus on business logic, is to focus on coding. And if we stuck in this designing part, then it is going to be difficult for us to concentrate on the logic and other coding related stuff. And additionally, we also need some standardization and reusability so we can make our overall system stand out, because there are thousands of developers out there and they are creating APIs, and we have all kind of API, from awesome APIs to awful APIs, and from excellent product to crappy product. And if you are working in industry, then you would know the problem I'm talking about. All the developers have their own style of coding and everything is different over there. So to understand this, consider these two APIs, and both APIs here are doing same thing, but as a consumer of the API, first one is better choice for us because it is giving more information about API and its functionality. And as I mentioned already, internet is evolving, and our API should catch up with that evolution, and it should support all kind of latest functionality and features. And to achieve this goal, we're gonna follow a few things, and we can say best practices or rules. But these are not the hard rules that you can't break. You can break it and still your API works fine, but it is better if you follow as many rules as possible. So let's start our discussion by talking about the flow of the REST communication. So we already know about this REST communication flow, but still little bit of information will help. So REST uses HTTP, a hypertext transfer protocol, as a transfer protocol, and it uses a resource-oriented architecture where a resource will be at the center of the communication. And it also uses client-server communication. And REST communication is a stateless. That means the server won't store any client-related information, and because of that, every request is independent of each other. So clients needs to pass all the necessary information at the time of communication. So communication starts when client sends a request to server with proper structure, and according to that request, server responds. And here client could be anything. It could be any kind of device such as mobile phones or computers or anything. But in our case, we can use any web client such as Postman or Insomnia. So this communication flow, we have two things, a request and a response. And in request, we have URI, HTTP method, header, and request body. And in response, we have response body and HTTP response code. So in this tutorial, we will discuss URI designing, and in upcoming tutorials, we will discuss other parts of the REST communication flow. So moving ahead, we need to visit a document named RFC 3986. So first, people who don't know about RFC documents, what is this RFC document? So RFC is a request for comment document, and it is a document published by technology communities such as IETF. It is the Internet Engineering Task Force, and we already heard this name before in this series. And IAB. IAB is the Internet Architecture Board, but sometimes independent authors also publish these documents. But usually these authors are big engineers and computer scientists. And 3986 is the identification number of that document. So according to this particular document, a generic URI sequence looks something like this. And it is a sequence of 5 elements in order, such as scheme, authority, path, query, and fragment. So every URI follows this sequence, and some elements are mandatory here and some are optional. So let's understand them one by one. So first we have is scheme, and a scheme cannot be empty. It is mandatory and it is a case sensitive, and it always starts with a letter and followed by a combination of letters, digits, and special characters such as plus sign, dot sign, and hyphen. And the scheme should be registered with IANA. So IANA is the Internet Assigned Numbers Authority. It is another community that handles this numbering thing. So let's say you create something new and you want to use your own scheme, then we should register this scheme with this kind of community so they can manage the internet. Few examples of scheme are HTTP, HTTPS, FTP, mail to, file, data, and much more. So these are the few examples of a scheme, but our discussion here is about REST, and REST uses HTTP and HTTPS, which is a secure version of HTTP. So we will use HTTP and HTTP only. And after this scheme, in our generic sequence, we have colon sign and we have double forward slash, and then we have authority. So authority is an optional element, and it is a combination of three things: user information, which includes username and password, and we have host, and we have port details. So ideally this authority looks something like this, but in our case we're not gonna put user information with authority, and we will only use host and port details, which looks something like this, where we will use IP address, colon, and port. And also we can use domain names such as like our website.com. So for example, if we are running application in local, then we will use localhost and port, and probably you have seen this before. So moving ahead, we have path element, which is a path of resource, and it should be hierarchical sequence, and it should resemble our file system. So that means if we have file system something like this and we want to see some video of some user, then our URL should look something like this. And here, according to our file system, user is the parent of video. So we have to go to users first, then inside users we need to choose user by unique ID, and for that user we need to choose video by ID inside videos folder. So that was path, where we use forward slash to represent relationship between resources. So next we have a query parameter, and this one is an optional element which helps to fine tune our results, and it adds additional value to our API. And this query can be used for various purposes, and we will discuss them in little while. So after query we have fragment, and it starts with hash sign. So probably you have witnessed this before, that when we open some websites, it scrolls to specific location automatically. So consider this Spring documentation link, and if we open this link in our browser, then it is automatically scrolling down to the specific topic, and we mention that topic here in fragment. So this is very helpful in modern web, mostly for UI, where a single page application is in vague. But for our REST request, there is no use of this, so we don't need to worry about this. So this was the generic sequence of URI, and here a few characters are reserved, such as colon, question mark, hashtag, square bracket, and @sign. So we need to keep in mind while designing the URI that these are the special characters that we can't use in the URI. So moving forward to our guidelines or rules, and to understand this properly, take an example of our social network application API, which looks something like this. So this API is to watch video, where we have video name as the ID of the video, and which includes the file type MP4, and this video belongs to some user with user ID U_243. So we will visit few rules and we will apply those rules with this API. So our first rule is about forward slash, and it says that use of forward slash separator is to represent hierarchical relationship of resources. So if we compare our URI and our file system, which looks something like this, where we have users and system inside root, and inside users we have user, then we have images, profile, and videos. So basically this means that user is a parent of video, and our URI is not showing that because this API doesn't follow hierarchical relationship. So if we apply this rule to our URI, then we need to go inside users folder, and then we need to look for user with user ID. And once we get that user, then we need to go to videos folder, and then we need to choose video with video ID. So after applying this rule to our API, it looks something like this, which represents hierarchical relationships of resources. And next rule is again with the forward slash, which says trailing forward slash shouldn't be used. So consider below two URIs, and only difference between these two is the forward slash at the very end. So this trailing forward slash doesn't add any value to API. Instead, it is creating confusion here because it looks like something is missing from URI, and also URI should be unique to resource, and this extra character in URI can affect entire URI. So we shouldn't use the trailing slash in URI. And if we apply this rule to our example, then it will look something like this. So next rule we have is about use of underscore and hyphen. And rule number 3 says use hyphen to increase readability and use underscore as least as possible. So this rule applies to many places. So first let's say we have space in our URI. Then replace all these spaces with hyphen, because space can create huge confusion while making calls from UI as well as adding query parameters. And next, if you have underscore in your URI, then replace all underscore with hyphen. So there are a couple of reasons for not using underscore in our URI, such as in UI we use underline to show something is clickable, and this underscore in link gets hidden behind this underline. And in browser, when we put this URI in address bar, sometimes it is difficult to see, which can create the confusion. So basically replace all underscore with hyphen. And if we apply this rule to our example, then our API will look something like this, where we have removed all the underscores and spaces with hyphen. So as you can see here, this form is more readable now. And moving ahead to rule number 5, which says use lowercase instead of uppercase. So we already discussed that the URI is the combination of 5 elements, and these elements have different characteristics when it comes to case sensitivity. So for example, scheme and host details are case insensitive, where path, which includes file path of resource, is case sensitive. So this dual behavior causes confusion here, and additionally adding these extra cases in URI doesn't add any value. So that's why it is better if we use something common everywhere, and lowercase is easy to read, so always use lowercase for your URI, and especially for scheme, authority and path, because query parameter is dynamic thing, and which can include real-time values, which could be anything. So leave query parameter out of this rule, and if we apply this rule to our example, then our API will look something like this. And the next rule is about file type, which says that do not include file extension in URI. So we know that API represents a resource, and that representation could be in any format. So in that case, we have two options. We can put file extension in URI, which we did in our example, but this is not right approach in REST, because we mentioned earlier that representation can change based on consumer, and if we put file extension with URI, then it becomes tightly coupled with URI, and all clients can't use this API, and it is fixed for specific kind of user. So in our case, let's say we have one client which requires this MP4 file in binary format, then he can't use this API. So in this case, we need to use approach 2, which is to use header for storing media type. So in header, we have something called content type and accept, and over there we can put information about media type and representation format. So we will discuss this in detail in headers and meta information tutorial, but if we apply this rule to our example, then it looks something like this, where we have request and client can pass media type in header. So these were the rules for URI format, and after applying these rules to our example, this is the difference between that two. So here our modified URI is much more readable, user friendly and consistent, and additionally we know more about URI and resource relationship to each other. So let me stop this video here for a few seconds because it is a lot to grasp, and meanwhile you can comment how do you like this video so far, and share and subscribe because your response is your contribution. So moving ahead, we have to model resource with our API, and for that we need to learn a little bit about resource modeling. So here we know that forward slash represents hierarchical relationship of resources to each other, but that forward slash also represents individual resource. So take our old example, and here users u underscore 243 and videos are also an individual resource. So basically when we design any API, we are dealing with multiple resources. And in REST, there are four distinct resource archetypes that help us to understand behavior and structure of the resource. So for simplicity and clean design, we need to make sure every resource aligns with only one archetype. And if you have resources that closely related with each other, then create another separate API for that, but we shouldn't merge two resources. So these archetypes are document, collection, store, and controller. So let's understand them one by one. So first we have a document, and a document is a singular entity, same as object or a database entity. And this representation of document includes fields and values, and as a value there could be anything such as any other object or links or anything. So we can consider this document as a base archetype, and other types can be children of this. So let's take our social network example, and in database we have user information. And if we want information of particular user, then our API and the response of that API will look something like this. So here address is individual resource, and if we want only address, then our API looks something like this. So next archetype is a collection, and a collection is a directory or a collection of object which is managed by server. So take our example API, and a client can add, delete, or modify existing resource with this API, but the final decision of creating and deletion will be from server. But here users is a resource of a collection type. Moving ahead, we have store, and store is also a directory, but it is a client managed directory, and here client can put anything or take it back or delete it. And basically stores do not create a new resource. So for example, in our social network website, where all users have videos resource inside them, and a client can add and delete videos over there, so which has URL something like this. And every time client adds some video, it comes here, and the client can delete the video or modify that resource, but it will come here always. So this videos folder is a place to store video, and all user will have it. And additionally, URI will be chosen by client when the first time they add resources. Means let's say we are adding one video right now, and the system gave some unique ID v1 to that video, then our URI will be something like this. So the difference between collection and store is the collection is a server managed and the store is a client managed. And moving ahead, we have controller. So controllers is the executable functions, and it takes some inputs and returns some output. So for example, we need to calculate something, or we need to send a message or something like that. But normally these are the actions that can't be mapped with our standard CRUD methods. So URI to this kind of resource is very simple, because controllers doesn't have any child, so controller name appear at very last, and it looks something like this. So these are the four archetypes of resource, and before designing our URI, we have to align our resource with one of these. So next, let's see how we can design our URI that models our resources. So to make our communication clearer, client or consumer of the API should know about our resource, their structures and behavior by just looking at the URI. And two things can help us to achieve this goal. So first thing is a forward slash that represents relationship between resource, and another thing is if we follow some naming convention that gives a little bit idea about resource. And the next four rules here is for naming conventions. So those rules says if your resource is of document type, then provide singular noun. And if your resource is of collection or store type, then provide plural noun or plural phrase. And if your resource is of controller type, then provide verb or verb phrase. So take our previous example again, where we have user information. And if we are talking about one user, then our API will look something like this, where user 1 is the ID, it represents a singular entity. But here users also a resource, but it is a type of collection. So if our API is for users, then it will look something like this, and users is a plural noun. So same way, inside user we have videos folder, and that videos folder is for video of that user, and in that case our API will look something like this. And at last we have controller, which represents method call or some process, And let's say we have some method with user which calculates age, then our API will look something like this. And here calculate age is verb or verb phrase that represents some processing. So moving forward, we have rules that are related to variable segments of path. So this rule says a variable segment should be using identity based values. So meaning of that is when we see our URI, we have two kind of segments. We have static segments and we have dynamic segments. So static segments means segments that don't change. It is selected by API designers. And the dynamic segments are which can change based on resource we are addressing to. In our URI, we have scheme, authority, users, and videos that don't change. And we have user ID and video ID that change based on resource. So this rule is saying that every dynamic segment should be replaced with identity based values and it should use alphanumeric values. And in our example, we have U-243 and V-332, which is alphanumeric value for identity. And next, we have last rule related with resource naming and modeling, which says not to use CRUD function name as in URI. And I would say not only CRUD operation, but we shouldn't expose method name in URI at all. So for example, sometimes we see API is something like this. So readability wise, this API is good and consumer knows about the function of this API. But it is not correct way because HTTP method should be used to indicate CRUD functions whenever we can. So this API preferred like this where we use HTTP method delete to represent delete operation. So same thing with other functions such as post, put and get. In our URI generic pattern, next we have query. So this component in URI contains a list of parameters that will be considered as a variable and that help to bring more functionality and more uniqueness to the URI. And these parameters could be mandatory or optional. So consider below examples. So these both APIs are not same, but it is closely related. And here this text parameter in the second API provides additional information to perform an operation. And query parameters don't affect caching mechanism of server, so it is very helpful to make API versatile. And we can use this query parameter for various purposes such as to filter the collection or store. So take our old example of getting list of users. And this API will give us a list of all users. But let's say we want user with first name John only. Then we can add a query something like this. So in this case, our query is helping our API to filter the collection and give us the response. So next we have pagination and probably you have seen this before. For example, let's say we have table in UI where we put user information and we have 1 million users in database, but in UI we only need 10 to show in the table. And in that case, we can use this pagination to get a specific data chunk. And our API will look something like this. And here we are using start with and page size parameters that is helping to get a specific list of users. And we can use this query parameter to add additional parameter of information or decision making. And our message sending example represents that. So these are the rules that can help us to design proper URI that will be readable, consistent and easy to use. So that's all for now in this tutorial. I hope you guys like this tutorial. Comment below and tell me what do you think about this tutorial and your questions and suggestions. And don't forget to like, share and subscribe so we can continue to provide good quality videos on various technologies. And in upcoming tutorial, we will discuss HTTP methods. So see you guys in next one. Till then, like, share and subscribe and keep learning. Thank you very much.